Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squad for boxing news and views from around the internet. Efe Ajagba needed a test, and he certainly got one against Ali Eren Demirezen. So they fought just this past weekend. I'm not going to go into the fight in terms of round by round action because the time for a post-fight review, that's come and gone. I missed the opportunity, didn't see the fight live because I was doing a post-fight review for another fight, the Dillian Whyte one. But I've had a couple of days to sort of watch the fight a couple of times, sit back, think about it, make some notes, and I want to talk about some of the good, the bad, some of the what next, but also some of the fan reaction. This fight ended in a unanimous decision win to Ajagba, 99-91 on two cards, 97-93 on another. But that possibly doesn't reflect what a good competitive fight it actually was. Demirezen was actually giving Ajagba something to think about. He was actually pressing him in this fight, and he was competitive in the fight too. He was ultimately outworked by Ajagba. And I'll cover some of these things, but you would think by the way that some people are reacting that Efe Ajagba had lost the fight. Some people are saying that he's no good now because he was taking the distance against Demirezen. Some people are saying he's a bum. Some people are saying he'll get knocked out by Daniel Dubois. Some people are just really sort of riding him into the ground. And some of the reaction is just, in my view, it's over the top. Ahead of this fight, Ajagba was 10-0, but he'd never really been pressed, to a degree in his career so far. He hadn't been sort of put under pressure. No one had really been able to withstand his punches, give him something to think about, and really try to work him over, work him out, wear him down, and try to really get under his skin. And this was the fight in which we saw much of what I just spoke of just then. Ali Eren Demirezen, a 2016 Olympian, just like Efe Ajagba, he came to fight. He didn't come to fall down, he came to win. And I think some of the reaction from some fans saying that he's been exposed or that he was poor in this fight, Efe Ajagba that is, I think that's really short-sighted. This is a guy who heading into this fight only had 16 rounds under his belt. It was always going to come to a point in his career where someone was going to stand up to his punches. Someone would be able to punch back and really try to actually make a fight of it. And this was it. Ahead of the fight, I said that this was the right test at the right time. That this was a fight that I thought would go rounds and Demirezen would be competitive. And so it proved. And I think some people looked at this fight, they hadn't heard of Demirezen, and just thought, oh, this is another nothing fight. There were some people in my pre-fight video comment section who said that Ajagba was fighting another tin can, that he was fighting another bum and he needed to step it up. And I sort of reacted to that and said, Demirezen is not a bum. Just because people haven't seen him because he's been fighting in Europe, not really on TV screens in the UK or the US, doesn't mean that he's not a talented fighter. And he proved in this fight that he actually came to fight, that he does have something to offer in the heavyweight division, and he will give some fighters some trouble. For the most part, Ajagba really had to lean on some tools that he's got in his toolbox other than the right hand and his hard, straight punches, which have effectively knocked out most of the other competition that he's fought, except for Curtis Harper, who walked out of the ring when he fought Ajagba in 2018. But I thought Efe Ajagba, for the most part, looked assured, he was measured, he wasn't under pressure, and the win was set up by the jab, which was relatively effective for the most part. Helped set up the win, helped set up some good scoring punches. He was landing the jab to the body and the head. He wasn't just pouring with it, he was ramming it home with some good force behind it. He was also patient in this fight. Didn't look rushed. He didn't look like he was gassing in spite of the punches that he was throwing. He threw almost 900 punches in that fight, which is quite a lot for a heavyweight. He was averaging almost 90 a round. This was a 10-round fight. It was 890-something punches. So he showed a good engine in that fight. And the punch variation too was decent. He really did start to mix it up midway through the fight. And he needed to, because Demirezen was coming at him, he kept coming, and he needed to keep Demirezen guessing. But because Ajagba wasn't getting many openings, he did need to vary his punches. He couldn't really let his straight right hand go in this fight. Demirezen was defensively responsible, as I thought he would be, and Ajagba really had to adjust and try to use other punches. We saw the left hook being used later in the fight. There was a number of good punches to the body and head. He was looking to short right hands, short hooks that he was throwing against Demirezen when he was up close. I also liked that he was mixing up the force on his punches. It wasn't just throwing massive shots, all with force behind it. You know, think that Oscar Rivas and Dillian Whyte fight. Rivas, it was just all the same power all the time, really trying to put everything behind every punch every single time. Whereas in this fight against Demirezen, Ajagba varied his punches very well, and it sort of depended on what shots he was looking to set up. There was a lot of soft, hard, soft, hard, soft, hard. It allowed him to throw above those average punches that heavyweights throw, which is roughly about 45 per round, and he was up close to 90. It would have looked good to the judges. He was using the jab well. It also served to act as, at times, a form of defense. And I think we got an indication of Ajagba's chin to some extent, which we hadn't seen tested too often in the past. He took a lot of shots from Demirezen in this fight, and while Demirezen might not be the biggest puncher, Ajagba, he showed a decent chin. And I think the thing I liked was he was prepared to go the rounds. He was clearly in shape. He clearly was prepared to go the rounds, and he's going to be the better for it. He had 16 total career rounds ahead of this fight. He had another 10 which he added here, and he's going to be the better for it. It was a fight, I think, like I said in my pre-fight coverage, right fight at the right time. He can afford to make some mistakes and probably get away with it and still come through with a win. And I think there were some things that I didn't like so much in this fight, but I think the good outweighed the bad, and I'll get to the bad now. But overall, I thought it was a pretty measured performance, and Efe Ajagba, it kind of felt like he didn't really get out of first gear or second gear. At times he started to let his hands go a bit more, but he seemed to be conscious that Ali Eren Demirezen wasn't going to be a guy that he could probably take out with one punch, but he didn't really get the opportunity to land that one punch. Demirezen was very wary of the right hand and covered up, very defensively responsible, was looking to counter Ajagba, looking to sort of throw over the top of his jab. But what I didn't like with some of what Ajagba was doing was, especially early in the fight, I was a little bit concerned because he was, when he was done punching, he'd just put up the high guard, he'd let Demirezen walk in and effectively get away his shots. And that often resulted in Demirezen punching around Ajagba's guard. He was landing scoring shots. He's effectively just stepping in. He'd throw either a left hook or a right hook around Ajagba's guard. And apparently Ajagba has been working on inside fighting, so perhaps that can explain a little bit of, some of his willingness to let Demirezen come in close. And perhaps he didn't respect Demirezen's power, so he was prepared to try a few things, but he can't go into a fight with a noted puncher and do what he did in this fight, especially in some of those early rounds. No way should he be allowing someone who can punch, just to close the distance at will, because he's inviting them in to unload a combination. And we did see Demirezen do that. But also, when he allowed Demirezen to close the distance, get his work away, there were times early in the fight where he wasn't really responding with much inside work. Effectively, he had the high guard up, the earmuffs on, and he wasn't really doing too much. He could have been banging to the body a bit more. He could have been looking for an uppercut. He could have been looking to just be a bit more active instead of allowing Demirezen to get his work away, but effectively have no consequence of doing so. I think he did look to do a little bit better later in the fight from about the mid-rounds on. He started to try mix in the odd uppercut, the odd body shot, but certainly there were some times early in the fight where he did effectively just let Demirezen work away at him. Also, just getting back to what I was just talking about before about allowing Demirezen to sort of close the distance at will, he could have made better use of his height and reach at times in this fight. Keep his opponent at range, where I think in this fight where he did do that at different times, he looked better. He looks better at long range than up close, fighting a close quarters battle. But I think some of what we saw in this fight was him wanting to just try and test some things out. But he does also need to work on getting his hands back to his chin quickly. There were some times he was caught by Demirezen after, he'd thrown a jab or he'd thrown a right hand, let go of a punch or whatever, and he was just a little bit slow in bringing his hands back up. And with his head movement not being fantastic in this fight, I think he said ahead of this fight he was going to really look to improve on it. I think we saw a little bit of that. There was some head movement early on, but it sort of did drift away a little bit as the fight progressed. He does need to make sure that his hands and his defense are tight. And at times he was defensively responsible, but other times he was a little bit open and allowing Demirezen some opportunities to tag him, which some of it I thought was unnecessary and some things he can work on. And in terms of the scorecards, yeah, I thought maybe it was a bit wide. I thought there was a few rounds you could arguably have given to Demirezen. I thought 97-93 was a bit fairer than the 99-91 cards. But had Demirezen been a bit more high volume, he might have won some more rounds here because he was landing a far higher degree of accuracy than Ajagba. But it did feel like Efe Ajagba was holding back, and maybe he could have sort of put the foot down, but I think he wanted to go the rounds. And even though he'd said he was looking to knock Efe Ajagba out in 1 or 2 rounds, he'd also in pre-fight sort of said he wouldn't mind going the rounds, and he looked comfortably doing so. I thought it was a good effort, and I think some of this talk of he was exposed and that he's basically nothing is ridiculous. The guy's had 11 fights now. He's just fought an undefeated prospect who actually does have some pedigree. It is the best opponent he's faced, and he outpointed him handily enough. Sure, there were some things that he can work on and do better, but isn't this the time that he does it in his prospect phase while he's coming up in the division? This is exactly what he's meant to do. He's meant to be tested. He's meant to improve. He's meant to get the experience. So when he steps up to a higher level, he can actually be a better fighter and know what to do in certain situations because he's been through it before. And I just think some people are being a bit over the top, being reactionary to. It reminds me of when Daniel Dubois was taken the distance by Kevin Johnson. Some people were just all over Dubois, and I thought it was a bit ridiculous and over the top then, because Dubois was better for those rounds. But now that Daniel Dubois has come out in a fight against Nathan Gorman and looked devastating in that fight, people are back on the Daniel Dubois hype train. So maybe some of what's happened is actually good for Ajagba in terms of leveling out expectations. Because I think there was a degree of, within the heavyweight division, maybe the hype was outstripping the performances to date. And that sort of happens with young up-and-coming fighters who people do believe in are starting to get excited about, especially power punches when knocking guys spark out. I'm actually reminded of, on my backup channel, 99 Boxing. It's in the description if you want to go there, subscribe, support my backup channel. I have a highlights clip of some of Efe Ajagba's, I think, first 7 or 8 fights, whatever it was. And there's a whole bunch of commentary on there. There's all these urban legends that have developed about Efe Ajagba, that of his first 5 opponents, that he hospitalized a whole bunch of them and that one had even died. There's these myths floating around that people believe that they've been propagated on different websites on the internet. Just this whole wave of propaganda about who this guy is and what he's actually done in the ring. And I've had people arguing with me in the comment section about, because I've said, no, that's not true. No one's died. And he said, no. This one person said, no, I've seen it. This guy actually did die. And I was like, really? I mean, come on. So maybe some of what's happened is going to, especially with the casuals, maybe some of that will just taper off a little bit. It will sort of release some of the pressure for Ajagba just to keep developing, because he needs seasoning. He's still a bit raw. He's still got things to work on. Demirezen, as I said in my pre-fight coverage, right fight at the right time. Beatable opponent, but would give Ajagba a good test, and so it proved. And he needs more of these types of opponents before he steps up to, a big contender level fight. He's a prospect at the moment. He'll soon be a fringe contender in a number of fights, and he needs more seasoning fights like we've just seen. I didn't mind that he didn't put the foot down. I liked some of what I saw. There was good punch variation. He was using the jab. It wasn't just relying on the big right hand. That weapon was there. He didn't get to deploy it as much as we might have thought he would. But overall, it was a pretty good performance. I liked what I saw. And I think people that are saying that he is a complete bum or whatever, well, they just don't know anything about boxing. It's ridiculous. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.